what do we do here this year?
All right. So one of the things I said that we should start with, and you had sent me a list too, which I'll have to find in a second. But I said that the new year for me was a really good sort of the reminder that, hey, when times change, did I remember to replace the batteries in the smoke alarm or swap the filters in whatever? So it's just a good time to go over your scheduled checklists and see if there's anything that you may have overlooked. Um, see, you sent your email last night, wasn't that right, Barry, or was it the night before?
Yeah. Hmm.
It all runs together. You're going to have to be specific. I say so. I told somebody I took the bulk of. Let's see, how long did I take off? Too much time. But
Yeah.
well, I basically we've got a use it or lose it vacation policy. They'll roll a couple of weeks over, but when it gets into months, they get a little snarly about it.
Hmm.
So I started booking vacation on Thanksgiving in November. I worked 1 week in December and was burning vacation the rest of the time. And I mean, I was checking email here and there, but I was relying on Wilson to do all the heavy lifting. And I come back in on Tuesday of this week to 258 unread emails. So I decided then that I am never ever taking a long stretch of vacation again until I retire.
Well, there you go.
But that, yeah, so I know you had sent me an email and I remember seeing it, but now I have lost it. So what was on your list? There were some couple of things you had mentioned there too.
Yeah, I think we could get started with this list, and then you and maybe anyone else wants to add to it. But I thought one of the very first things to do would be to check your station authorization documents. I mean, yes, we've had them and they renewed and all that good stuff, but it's always a good time to check your frequency and power, your location. There was a station that just got a fine and maybe even a deletion today in one of the news reports because they were operating the wrong place for 2 months and then moved to a third place. And the FCC doesn't like that too much. Time,
Not unless you tell them.
that's true. And get their permission before you get started. Uh,
Right.
I think
Uh,
when we start talking about new maintenance log, um, we should probably get a set of normal readings, hey?
Right. If you don't have a benchmark, you don't know where you're going, and that's always a big challenge.
So this is a
Uh,
very good time to do that
yeah.
and put down a list of what's on your transmitter.
You
Can't go wrong.
Mark's got a good comment about checking your ABIP certs too, in case if you're on the voluntary inspection schedule. So
All right.
if you're in a state that does that, that's a really good idea. The other thing I'd go with that is, and somebody had made the comment on one of the lists recently that the FCC hadn't rolled the public file doc folders over to 2024 yet. So if you were trying to update public file, make sure you've got that done, but make sure you've got a place to put it.
Yeah, and that's coming up next week for the deadline there, unless the FCC completely fumbles it and then says, don't do that yet. Um, the quarterly tower lighting examination, not the fact that you have a light, but what are you supposed to check every quarter? Anyone?
Well, check your tower. I mean, make sure you don't have bolts and stuff laying around the base of it.
Make sure you have a
Check your,
tower. Mark.
yeah.
Yes, that would be good to check and make sure that nothing is shaken loose in the winter storms and things like that.
Grounds, make sure your grounds are all still there.
Hmm. But the lighting system is what you are required to check every quarter to make sure that they turn on when the light level gets low and that they operate properly.
Day mode, mode for strobes. There's nothing more noticeable than a set of strobes on day mode in the middle of the night.
Yep, absolutely. So that's something you want to check. Tower fence security. It's a good time. If you're going to go out there, start a maintenance log, check your readings, check to see if that fence is still up and looking proper. A lot of people have a fence, but there's no lock on the gate, or the fence is falling apart.
That's my favorite picture, the one where there's a gate but no fence at all.
You are right. You got one of those handy?
I will keep digging while you're talking, and I think I know where I put it.
Because I've got your snow picture here noted in number 10 uh, as well. So at any rate, you want to plan for the NRFC. Why do you want to plan for NRC in January? Well, get it done. Then you don't have to worry about it. But more to the point, it is a time to check with your the engineer that's going to do it, find out when they're going to come through. And typically, if you get on their list, they'll save you a lot of travel costs by splitting it among multiple stations as they do a circuit. ABIP, the Alternative Broadcast Inspection Program. You may want to get that together. Some states do it as a courtesy of you being there or being a member of the State Broadcast Association. So it's a good thing to check. You do have that leeway that once you get your compliance certificate, you're free of most, not all, most inspections should a field agent come around and check you out. They'll see the compliance certificate and say goodbye. Unless, of course, you are interfering with somebody else or something that they have observed, like your daytime strobes are on at night or something else, then they can and will come in for an inspection. Jeff mentioned the backup battery in your transmitters. Those things do need attention from time to time, and replacing it once a year is just simply a way of avoiding having a problem later on.
Right. And the other thing to think of, I mean, most transmitters, I say most, a lot, if the battery goes dead, it's not that big a deal. They just hold latching alarms or whatever.
Right?
But there are a few models, and I think we may have one of them. I know of at least one other one where if the battery's dead and the transmitter goes down on a power outage, when the power comes back, the transmitter does not. So
The BE,
I was not mentioning names
no,
here.
I know, but I have a BE 5 kilowatt that it'll come back up, but it won't come up to the power set on the controller.
Right. So I
So,
mean
and I've
that
been burnt. I've been burnt once with that, and that was the one that had a 9 volt battery in it too, and it's buried.
right. And we've got like in ours, I mean, we do monitor battery power and you'll get an alarm if the battery power is if the battery's getting low. But I mean, sometimes, and I don't know, depends on the model again. Some of them you'll get the battery alarm, and then you've got a day or two to get it replaced, and you know that can be a challenge. So yeah, definitely having the battery replaced before it gets to that point is a good thing. That's why I say once a year. I mean, it's just one of those situations that if you do it once a year, you don't ever have to worry about it.
So you could turn this into a checklist if you'd like
Yeah.
and check that item off.
Yeah. Oh, and you were talking about the so the snow picture. Incidentally, I've got a bunch of them, but the particular one that I say like the most is the one that there. I'll go to current slide and hit share. See, I got to minimize that. I've got 3 monitors today, which means I don't know where anything is. There we go. Share screen. Oh, I can't do it while you're sharing, so.
Go ahead.
All right. Okay, and share and that monitor. Now let me move all the other stuff out of the way.
Yes, it does.
So that's the final of I think that might be it's some tube transmitter, but same deal. It's one of those, the wind blew horizontally, blew through the louvers and filled the building full of snow. And including because, of course, it was blowing in through the louvers and through the transmit or through the right through the exhaust. There, let me resume and should be able to click. So the louvers themselves blew open with the sideways snow, and that's an argument for mechanized louvers if you're in that kind of geography in a place where that happens. But again, it's a good time to inspect. Now, I've run into situations down in the hurricane country where wind was blowing salt water directly into the transmitter exhaust. I'm not a design person by any stretch, but I'm just led to believe that salt water and electronics typically don't play well together. So yeah, that's another sort of thing that it's like I say, the New Year is just a good time to do these inspections and just look at all the things that you may not normally have time to look for. Uh, if you're in a more tropical area, that's also the time to do some groundskeeping. And I mean, I've got more before and after pictures of sites that you can't access than I can shake a stick at.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very good.
those are the kind of things that I mean, I know I show the same pictures over and over again, but it just it's one of those I see the same things over and over again.
Well, that is really the story that as you go around to all the different places that you do and you see a lot of this, it's amazing how many people don't think of this.
Well, and I say the cool thing. It's not the cool thing. I mean, we're all people, so we all do tend to make a lot of the same mistakes. And you know, if you've come from similar backgrounds and similar experience, then you're going to approach things from similar angles. So
Mhm.
sometimes it's like, hey, have you ever thought of looking at this? Oh, no. Well, you should.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
And while we're talking about transmitters, if you get through the snow, check the air filters.
yep. And that'll depend again whether you're air conditioned or, I mean, a lot of sites use not eco mode, but what do you call it? Mark will know. But when you are running air conditioning in the summertime and then switch to
Econ
circulated air,
economizer.
is that okay? So it is an economizer mode.
Mhm.
I just had several guys stop at one of my transmitter sites, one that's furthest down in South Jersey, and we noticed the generator is going through a lot of coolant to the point where it wouldn't start if we didn't refill it. And
Mhm.
somebody serviced it like 3 months ago. So that's another thing to make sure your generator is ready.
Yep. And not just the generator because I mean you can run the generator up and test it great, but if the transfer panel's blown up, then you're still not getting anywhere. So you got to do a fully functional test, like pull the main breaker to the building or something upstream of the transfer switch power detector.
Yeah, so you want to schedule a time and go out and do that. Maybe not in morning drive, but check to make sure that it works.
That comes back to the batteries too. Speaking of scheduling, I mean, if you're looking at, and I'll pick on us because I know our gear, of course, a little better. But if you're picking on like a first generation NV transmitter and you need to replace the controller battery, you're going to have to pull a module out that requires shutting the transmitter down. Now, when we got to the GVs, we learned from that and put in little battery holders, which frequently jam and break. So a marginal improvement. And then on the newer ones on the VS, it's gotten quite a bit better again. VX, sorry. So yeah, again, if you've got one where you're swapping out batteries and you've got to take it down to swap out the batteries, you want to be sure you schedule that. Like
Hmm.
you say, morning drive is typically not the best time to do that unless you've got a fully functional backup.
Sure, sure. We skipped over tower fence signs to check. again, this is something that during the seasons, they can get old, they can fall apart, or vandals can also cause a problem. And you're required to have a sign at your main access point or on the tower itself with the ASR number. And it's good to check to make sure that those are in good shape. Now, and you may want to do this in the spring, but start your checklist now. That way you will get these things done.
And I mean, to say a lot of it will depend on where you happen to live. I mean, if you're in, well, Miami next week is showing temperatures in the 70s and 80s, and it's like, yeehaw, I'm looking forward to that. But, so down there, I could probably be doing a lot of this stuff right now if it happens to be a quiet time.
Sure. And
Also, you should check your UPS batteries, especially if you have some smaller UPSs. I got hit really weird this last week where 3 UPS batteries all went at once. And then I looked in the records and I said, oh, gee, I bought them all 4 years ago at this time.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I changed the batteries, but this time I put stickers on them when I changed them.
That actually is a really good reminder for me too. So I made a note. The UPS that holds our TTT webinars up during power outages was purchased in 2020. So yep, it's getting due for a new set too.
okay, good.
So, all right. What do they say? The plumber's pipes get fixed last.
I have one more item here that I've already pre-programmed, as you can see. Previous chief engineer. That's a knowledge issue here. Now, you may be the chief engineer for the last 40 years, Mark, but maybe you've just taken the job and you don't know a whole lot about what the site has been through over the years. It's always good to touch bases, if you can, with the previous chief engineer and get some knowledge, get some experience, get some tips that will make your year easier.
A lot of that, of course, and then not. I guess it is politics when you get right down to it, but the circumstances under which the previous engineer left will factor into how you make that approach.
Well, yeah. Then we have to call you.
Now, no, not necessarily. I mean, it may come down to as much as you buy them dinner and a couple of pick a beverage of choice. But
Sure.
yeah. I mean, it definitely. It's always good to network whenever you can. That's why, that's why things like this are so critical.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone else have anything that you think should be on this list right here? We could certainly go through the site situation as we have discussed in the past. Is there a toolkit there? Is there a DVM there? Is there emergency water or food there? Is there an emergency toilet there if you are that far away? Those are all good things to check.
Or a bumper dumper. Mark knows, yeah. I see the laughing. No, those are the coolest invention ever. So Barry's got the blank look. If you've got a receiver hitch on your truck, the bumper dumper is basically a toilet seat on a receiver hitch. It just plugs into the class 4 hitch on the back of your vehicle. And you can slide a 5-gallon bucket lined with a bag underneath, and you got a portable toilet.
Mm-hmm.
Beats all hell out of squatting upside the building in a 4-foot snowdrift.
So those are all good things for us to use as a checklist to get the year started. Now, suppose you find something that needs to be replaced or repaired. Now the question is, where do you get good advice, counsel, experience? Do you just call the car salesman? And someone sent me a note this morning and asked me about what car salesman I would send them to. But Jeff and Mary, you've got some ideas too on this, which we would like to share because it's important. You can call certain suppliers and you can get the real experience answer, Or you can call someone who is just an order taker and they're anxious to sell you something. And it may not be what you need.
A lot of times you can get a feel for that too. I mean, if you call with a problem and they're trying to help you solve the problem instead of trying to sell you something else, that's usually a clue. Now, if they're suggesting things that may help you solve the problem by replacing various things with other things, well, that might be part of the problem solving. So you do build a level of trust up, and I mean, there are a lot of times, like I know I see a couple of different vendor reps on here that are not above calling me on occasion and say, hey, can I link you in with this customer to answer these questions? So I guess the big thing is if you get somebody that tries to answer it all themselves and is seems to be afraid to reach out and say, hey, I got to ask somebody else. I don't know this, but I know who does. So yeah, just build a confidence level with somebody. I mean, that's why I wanted to lead off with mentioning we were swapping territories around because now if you're in Minnesota, for example, you'll be reaching out to Jeff Wilson with questions. And if it's technical, he'll probably dump it on me, and that's fine too. We all work together. We're on the same team. But yeah, you build the relationships, and you'll tend to get better support from somebody you've got a good relationship with. As opposed to if I pick up the phone and go, oh, that asshole again. Well, your price just got a little higher.
Well, one of the things that I look for in my career is when I need parts or service or whatever, is what is the orientation of the person I'm calling? Is that person going to, as I say, just want to sell me something and be moving on? Or does that person take the time to know my situation and may say, well, if I were to sell you this set of tubes, you would save more money by putting in a solid state transmitter. Or I could sell you this particular codec, but it won't be compatible with what you already have. And so it's important for us to know whom we can trust for just
Right.
that reason.
Yeah, and a lot of that just comes from experience. You work with somebody, say when Brian, when I mentioned the oh this asshole again, somebody was smirking on screen because we had that word for word conversation last night. But yeah, I mean it's just building a comfort level. I mean, there are folks that will call me and I'll see their caller ID and I mean I can pick up the phone and go, what the hell do you want? Because it's just that comfortable a relationship. When Mary calls, I'm much more formal because, well, I want to, sorry, I can't do that with a straight face. But yeah, I mean, the relationships we build in this industry are huge, and it's like Mark knows that if he's got a hole to fill in a technical presentation or a technical seminar, that he can call me up and I'll usually haul off over to Nebraska and do it. So yeah, yep, build the relationships, and we spend so much time doing that. I mean, Grady and I. God, Grady, how long ago was that one on Rhode Island where that 50 where you were customizing all the power control in it and probably engineering it better than we did?
I don't remember.
It was 25 years ago at least, wasn't it?
Rhode Island? Oh, you mean the 990?
Yeah,
Oh yeah. Oh boy, that was a long time ago. The old WALE, and before that it was WLV. No, I don't remember.
but a long time ago anyway. And I mean, that's I think when
Yeah.
you and I first met, and then you come up and saw the Library of Doom in customer service.
Yeah. Yeah. That that place is now completely gone. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a building there and the old Nautel transmitter is still in there, but the
Mhm.
guy who bought the site has been selling it out as pieces parts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, going back that far, those things still have value, so that's cool.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of those still in use. And if you know what you're doing, you can take pieces from old ones and put them in new ones and, mess
Yep.
around and make it work.
Yeah, KOKC in Oklahoma City, the old Coma is still running one as a backup. Although if JD gets this way, it's probably on air as much as the new one. So still a lot of fun.
All right, Mary, let's focus on you for just a second as a rep that people can call at Broadcast Depot and order anything from what a transmitter down to small parts. What is your attitude when somebody calls to make sure that they're asking for the right quote?
Well, that's part of the process is getting to know, asking the right questions, like, and trying to figure out what their need truly is, because sometimes they'll tell you something and that's not exactly what they're looking for. You know, over the years, I've found terminology can be different. Like one person might say it's an adapter, but they're really meaning a reducer. So asking the right questions is a lot of it. Uh, you get to know your customers, and I've always taken this to heart ever since my days of Harris, where it's their needs, it's what they require. So it's not what I can sell, but it's how can I help you solve your problem.
And sometimes you'll tell them to go elsewhere or to buy
I
direct.
have done that. I have done that because there are certain lines that I'm not competitive on, and I'm not going to tell them that I can do it and then mark it up 10% and they're paying 10% more. You know, I've got customers that I've bought stuff on Amazon for them, and I've told them, I don't get a discount. And sometimes they'll go buy it direct, and that's okay. And sometimes they'll say, "No, I don't want to hassle with it, just order it." But I think it's just being genuine. Like it's just being genuine and being honest, you know, letting them know what you can do, um, but not over promising. Like, I had a lot of good mentors at Harris, bringing me up through the sales ranks. And I had one that told me that your reputation is all that you have in this business. And it really is. You know, sometimes it's best to let somebody go someplace else because they're going to come back to you.
Yeah, that could happen too. I know for a fact that there has been a more than one occasion where I've recommended someone to you and you told them to buy elsewhere because they could get a better price or they could get a better service. One of the things I've always talked about over the years in writing is the fact that the lowest price is not always the best thing for you. Whether you're talking about buying a car or you're talking about a transmitter, you want a company that's going to support you. And there was a certain one there up in upstate New York that everybody sort of knows. It's no longer there, but you got a transmitter and you may get a manual that may or may not coincide with some of the parts that are in the transmitter. But the owner of that company, who used to decide to be on call, he put his pager in the drawer at the office and go home. And so, if you are off the air, and unfortunately, too many stations now do run only one transmitter without an auxiliary, you want something that's going to stay on the air.
I'll give you an example, and this happened at Harris many, many years ago. I had a high-profile customer that I gave my personal cell phone number to and told them they could call me anytime. And that stayed with them a long, long time. And they became a very loyal customer. You know, it, it, it was just going that extra mile, and it was something I didn't have to do. But that's the business that we're in isn't like a consumer type business. It's not like a Best Buy or a Target. It's the business that we're in is the service that we provide oftentimes allows a customer to stay on the air, which is their livelihood. And you have to have a heart in it. You can't, it's not a 9 to 5 job. It's just not.
I think George Marty was well renowned for giving his personal number out to customers. Jeff, you make it fairly easy to at least leave a message for you, unless you're
Oh.
on these vacation trips.
I despise the telephone. Everything I do dumps to voicemail, whether you call the office phone, the cell phone. If I look at the cell phone and recognize the number, I may answer it, but I'd prefer to answer a voicemail later at any day. Email's my preference if I've got it. But yeah, and I do have a personal cell. I could count on one hand the number of people that have that number in and out of the business. But Mary's right. It's 100% and totally about the relationships. You know, I'm going to make her tell the story. She knows the story I mean. Um, that because that story's carried over with her from 2 different companies.
3 companies.
There you go. So tell the story.
I know what the one you're talking about. It's the red high-heeled shoes. So when I worked at Harris, I wasn't even in sales. I was in order admin at the time. And I was in Richmond, Indiana in the fall. Went to dinner with John Bissett and a couple customers from West Virginia. And of course, after several drinks, the conversation kind of got a little out of hand, talking about a few customers that one used to be Deborah, that was now Greg, and talking about walking in high-heeled shoes. And so I told the customers in West Virginia, they were looking at buying 4 Harris transmitters. I told them that they get their own pair of red high-heeled shoes if they place the transmitter. Well, this was like August or September. December came around and I got a call. Where's my red high-heeled shoes? You're supposed to give them to me for Christmas. I said, no, you haven't placed the order for the transmitters. So about March, they placed the orders for the transmitters and they delivered like late March, early April. And they totally forgot about it, but I hadn't. I'd bought 2 pairs of red high shoes and put them in the plastic that they put the manuals in and stuck them in where the IPA modules go in. So when they got the transmitter, they opened it up and here sat these 2 pairs of red high-heeled shoes. So, but the best part of that story was that the general manager of the station was there when they delivered. So I acquired this name of Scary Mary because he didn't know the story behind all this and he was trying to figure out what kind of person ships red high-heeled shoes in the transmitter. But that story went around. I mean, I had customers calling me. I didn't get my red high-heeled shoes. You delivered a transmitter to me. So
Insulate you.
But the transmitter worked so much better with the high-heeled shoes in it, didn't it?
well, one of the engineers retired and he said, I still have my pair. So it's crazy. But it's all about the relationships. I mean, that was, just kind of a funny, but it stuck.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's carried over because, I mean, what was it, 2, 3 years ago, I had Amanda down in our Bangor office go out to the Salvation Army and ship a customer a back-ordered pair of red high-heeled shoes. So,
I
sorry,
called
we
Jeff. He
couldn't.
thought I'd lost my mind.
I already knew that.
Of all the transmitters that I've purchased from you, Mary, I have yet to get a pair of red high-heeled shoes.
No, I think you got a chocolate bar and a Pepsi.
I think you're right now that I think about it.
One of the stories that I like to use as an example, a couple of years ago, more so than that, I was working for one of the large consolidators and discovered that the auxiliary transmitter was not available because their old coax switcher had burned out. Eventually, a new switcher turned up from the uh, corporate purchase. And in discussing this with the fellow that I was going to have install it, he pointed out that the old coax switcher had the ports on the side, and this one had the ports on the top, or vice versa. And therefore, he could make it work, but the extra hours and plumbing just didn't seem to be a smart thing to do. Well, at that time, I called the supplier, the rep that I had done the most business with recently, and I mentioned what this situation was. And although he was not the one who sold it in the first place, he says, send me the switcher. I'll send you the right one. And he did it completely without any cost. Now, I'm not going to say that you're going to get that every time with every supplier, but as you develop a relationship with a supplier and they're more concerned with getting you on the air, as Barry said, and keeping you there, you're going to find that things will happen. Another example that I can relate, and unfortunately, Mike Beauvais, who many of you know, has retired. Well, he thinks he's retired. He's taking care of station up in Minneapolis now. I met Mike at the NAB show in 1978. And we talked, and we got to know one another. And the following year, I purchased one of the ITC 99s. And it had a, it worked. But then the B came out. And I talked to Mike about it one day. He says, "Oh, look, just send me the A. We'll upgrade it to a B and send it back to you." Now, again, I can tell you that at that time, that was a fair chunk of money, a budget that this little station didn't have. But this was a man who wanted to continue selling me cart machines. And as it was, that's what we did. We used them as our supplier. So what are we saying here? Get to know your suppliers. Even if you haven't bought from them recently, if you have a brand N transmitter, get to know Jeff. Or get to know Jeff.
We did make the joke that now that Ted's retired, we're just going to get IT to register Jeff at Nautel.com as the official North American sales address. And yeah, it'll be like, I need a quote. We'll get Jeff to do it. So, but yeah, then, and that's why I wanted to make the distinction that we have changed territories a little, because it's just easier when you see people, and I mean, for the little mom and pop stations, which a lot of us work with, for them, it's I make the not really a joke, but the comment that for somebody who has a 5 kilowatt day timer, a transmitter is a much, much, much bigger investment than somebody with 25 stations buying a 40 kilowatt FM. Because when you look at percentage of the bottom line, it's arguably the biggest purchase they'll ever make. And I mean, I would guess that we probably spend more time on the lower power, smaller customer sales than we ever do on the big group stuff, because they don't know. And I mean, it's not something, you can buy a transmitter once every 20 or 30 years or more in some cases. So yeah, it's all about making sure that there's a comfort level on both sides, that they know what they need, what the options are, what will do the job, and what will keep them going down the long haul. Because like you said earlier, I mean, you can, what do they say? Good, fast, cheap, pick two. And that's basically what you get. If you can get it fast and cheap, it's probably not going to be quite as good. So, it's a judgment call you make on a regular basis.
It's not always just the sale too. It's after the sale.
Yes.
Taking care of them after the sale.
This is something that I repeat to all the folks who advertise on the BDR, as an example, who provide me articles and user reports. And I point out to them that I am as much interested in the follow-up support as I am in the actual product and what it's doing. You can put a Notel on the air, you can put a BE on the air, you can put a Harris on the air, a Gates Air, and they'll be on the air and they'll probably be very serviceable. On the other hand, what happens when you do need help? Do you call and find that you have to leave a message and they'll get back to you by Friday afternoon? Or is there someone there that will get back to you within minutes? Because you can't always expect Jeff to sit there with the phone and waiting for it to ring. I think, Jeff, you probably made the point there that a lot of calls to you go to voicemail. And you can't stop what you're doing otherwise.
Well, the challenge is, and as I think it's getting worse as I get older. If I get distracted, one of my kids, we used to call it seeing butterflies, because he'd be talking and then you'd see a butterfly go by and he'd go chase the butterfly and the conversation was over. And I've gotten like that as I get older. So I'll be working on something and somebody will come in to ask a question and I'll ask them. And then I'll turn back to the computer and start working on something completely different than what I was working on before. And 5 things later, I'll realize I never did finish the first thing. So as I try more and more to get efficient at doing stuff, I tend to try to start something and follow it through to at least a specific point before I pick up anything else.
That also goes to the discussion that we had some months ago about how to get good support and to have information at hand, not just the model number, but the serial number, the power level that you're running, where you are, the call letters, all the important information that will help the support people to, first of all, identify who you are and where you are and what you have.
Right.
Then
And it's not just support, sales too. If you call Mary and say, I need a transmitter, Mary's going to have a laundry list of questions, or Brian or anybody else. They're going to want to know analog or HD. Shoot, I worked with one of Brian's cohorts not too long ago, and we were 4 emails into the conversation before I said, well, wait a second. If you've got multiple towers, this is not an FM transmitter. So I mean, we were answering AM or FM 4 emails into the conversation. That should have been one of the first parts. So that's the kind of thing that the more information you can provide up front, the easier it is for us to do our jobs. And I mean, we'll still ask the questions, but if you've already got the answers, it's a whole lot faster.
And I know one thing that I've always known about you and Nortel is that you are not sticklers for the last day of the warranty, that if something happens, you're very often the one that drives down and installs it when you can, because you want to keep them on the air.
Got a situation like that now. Transmitter's been in storage well past the end of the warranty date. And customer service is looking at having me go by and commission it on the way through on another trip in a little bit. So
Yes.
yeah, I mean, warranty dates are not. I mean, they're sure it's a relatively firm date, but there's some flexibility there. I mean, again, all else fails and you're up against the wall and the budget's totally screaming, bleeding. You can't get blood from a stone. Then give us a holler and we'll do what we can to help. Most cases, it's
I know of
our
a
best interest to have it
3.5
repaired.
that's been sitting on the shelf for 5 years and needs to get installed. And so you may get a call at some point on that one. But Brian, you are you have the ability to look from several vantage points, from the point of being a chief engineer yourself,
Yep.
from selling from other companies, and now you are selling from a rep with different companies.
One suggestion I wanted to make is that if you become the proud owner of a hand-me-down transmitter from another station, especially if it says Nautel on the front of it, call Jeff and let him know where that transmitter lives now. okay, it will make his life so much easier when you call up and you have a problem. And he
It's
goes, "Oh, I know what you're working on. Okay."
not just the act of making it easier, but we track quite literally everything about every one of our products. So every time we get a service call on a transmitter, it's recorded. Now I'm going to break the rules a little because I can. Seniority comes. Yeah, that's right. Wilson, plug your ears, close your eyes, whatever it takes. But so we'll just take an example. I'm going to just do another screen share, and somebody can throw one of their own. Mark, I'll get you to throw one of your call signs at me where you know you've talked to customer service. There, instead of making it there. Okay, Mark, tell me a call sign.
KEJS.
So this is our in-house database. And when I put in the call sign, it'll take a moment or two because I am in the office where the internet is terribly slow.
We're seeing your
But,
chat screen, Jeff.
oh, well, that's even better. You can listen to what it. Fortunately, I wasn't telling it anything too nasty. Let's stop that share and let's click on Wilson's face. See, like I said, I've got 3 monitors. I'm not used to working with this many screens. There, now how are we looking? I've got the green ring around it. So now I can see and should see marks. Let's see, do I see any cases open at all? So you got 4 cases on that transmitter over its history. There's a VX1 there. I can tell you where you Colin called in with a question, you called in with a question. So, and we can dig down beyond that and see the details of exactly what happened during that call. And high speed past it in case Ryan said anything nasty about Mark. But you know, we'll have activities. If there are any pictures sent in, the files will be there. We quite literally store everything. Like if Grady and I were talking about WALE in Providence a while back, and that's one of our oldest 50 kilowatts. That account may still be, yeah, there it is. And so that one, I mean, this system, we just implemented it in 2007 or so. But before that, even, you can see Kevin Rogers is currently the owner of the company, but he was a service engineer. So 94, he took a service ticket. And all of this stuff was scanned into the system. So we've got every call we've ever taken on this transmitter. And
Let me
I
add
mean,
to that. Let me add to that that I believe Nautel is the only manufacturer of AM and FM broadcast transmitters that has a copy of the exact manual that they shipped with the transmitter, so they have a record of every page that you have.
yep. And whether it's
Plus the performance test too.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
And I mean, we've got paper files. I can still find the initial tech sheets for this WALE transmitter, but here's where Phil Bean did the commissioning in 1990. And so his report's in there. And oh, look, there's Grady Moats. But yeah, I mean, it's we keep everything. The library up in customer service still has, actually, it's in our training room now, but we've got all the manuals for everything we've ever built. So, so the more information you give us, the better data we can keep with respect to making sure that we know what's what. And going back to what Brian was said, if you ever buy a used transmitter and you call us and say, hey, I own transmitter serial number or whatever, not only can I update our records for going forward, but I can give you the entire history of that transmitter. And I've done that several times when somebody was getting ready to buy a used box.
And that's a little more common today than it used to be because you can carry a kilowatt transmitter under your arm without much trouble in many cases.
Mm-hmm. You can carry a 2 kilowatt under your arm without any trouble now. They weigh the same. But yeah, they're a lot more portable than they used to be. One of my funniest stories was a site not too terribly far from where you are, Barry. Just a little bit to your, I got to look at a map, just a hair to your north. But they I got a call one day from a guy, and he goes, "Yeah, I'm just calling to double check the transmitter site address for this station." And I said, "Okay, why?" And he goes, "Well, I'm with the leasing company, and we're going to repossess their transmitter." And I said, "What are you driving?" And he goes, "Pickup truck." And I said, "You might as well turn around." And he goes, "Well, why?" And I said, "You're going to pick up a 50 kilowatt AM transmitter that's 14 feet long, 7 feet high, 4 feet deep, and weighs 6,000 pounds." He goes, "Oh, they didn't tell me that." So it's, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, we're not alone in keeping the information. I'm quite sure if you call Gates Air, they've got a fair bit of info on what they sold you too. And it's just the more information we've got, the better.
And the same would apply for BE Illinois.
Right. Speaking of that, I don't think I've got Mary's personal phone number on file, or I'd put it up on the screen, but she wasn't listening to that.
Yes, you do. It's on my email.
Oh, shush.
Same number
Okay.
I've had for 30 years.
There you go. But yeah, so again, when you're giving us a call for anything, the more we know, the better we can help with whether it's buying new or servicing old.
Now, Jeff, Mary, Brian, I'm going to raise this question because a number of people have to deal with it. If you're going to buy something, let's say, depends on the company or the agency, over $2,500, $5,000, they'll often say you have to get 3 quotes.
Mhm.
And suppose I want a BE transmitter, and I come to you and I say I need a quote. Are you going to be happy with me, or are you going to tell me, well, go get your quotes from BE?
It happens a lot. I mean, I've had calls from guys that say, "Look, we're getting a Gates Air. We want the Flexiva, but we need to get 3 quotes. Can you give me a quote?" And I don't mind doing that. I've got a boilerplate for that.
Mhm.
I mean, everybody has their preferences. I'm a Chev guy. Other people are Ford and Dodge people, and I'm not going to begrudge somebody what they prefer. So if they got to get 3 quotes and need a boilerplate, absolutely, I can do a list price quote in about 5 seconds.
Do you ever ask them, what price did Harris give you?
I've done that on occasion, sure. I mean, but having said that, again, if they know what they want and they're convinced this is what they want, and they say, "I want this and this is why," then I'm not going to try and sell. What do they say? 80% of your sales come from 20% of your customers, and the 80% of your work is spent trying to sell to the other folks. And I'm just we're busy enough these days that I'm not going to waste a lot of time trying to convince somebody that they need something that they've already decided they don't. I mean, again,
Well, and on the flip
people
side of
have
that, if you're
preferences.
giving them information down the road, 10 years down the road, they may come back to you and buy something.
I had a
Like,
guy one
Yeah.
day, he called me up. This would be about 20 years ago. He called me up. He needed or now 15 years ago, but anyway, he needed a 20 kilowatt transmitter. And he goes, "This is all the money we've got in the budget. This is all we can get. We can't finance anymore." And he had about 60 grand. Well, at that time, you weren't getting a 20 kilowatt transmitter for 60 grand if it had transistors in it. So I said, "Look," I said, "you need to give Mike Troji a call." And I gave him Mike's phone number, and he bought a Continental, and he was happier than anything. And he told stories at NAB. He goes, "Yeah, I called Nautel and they sent me to Continental." But I guarantee you, when his finances improved, I know who bought it or who sold him his next 4 transmitters. So yeah, I mean, like Mary said earlier, our job's to help as well as we can. There are people that will do their best just to sell you what they sell, but you catch on to that pretty quick, I like to think.
Mhm.
this happens to me all the time with particular beds. Like, they're bidding and it's a college and they need 3 beds. And I've actually given them contact names and numbers of competing companies. I mean, it's just part of the business.
Yeah. And by the same token, Barry, in your case where you said you were like $4,000 or $5,000 and you want a BE, but you need 3 bids, you'll go to Brian or Mary or somebody and they'll, or reach out to BE, they'll give you the name of 3 BE reps. There's your 3 bids, you're done. You know, I mean, there are so many ways through these systems. And I mean, even in the university platform, you can reach out to your preferred manufacturer and they'll help you write a bid spec. You know, they won't write the bid for you because, well, that's collusion and illegal, but they can send you a list of architecture and engineering specs, are called A&E specs, for the specific model you're looking at, and it identifies the things that are very strictly related to that particular brand.
Well, that
So,
all just, it all goes back to the relationship. Like it's like
yeah.
building the relationship, you know.
Steve Schott was that way, and I bought stuff from him for 20 years, and he changed jobs a lot. But I
Mhm.
just knew I could call him any time of the day or night, and he would tell me what to do or say, I'll get you this, or he was always helpful.
I've been working in sales for 17, almost 17 years now, and I still probably handle almost as many tech support calls as I did in tech support. You know, I mean, you go to the people you know,
Well, I
or you
get
go to the
calls.
people, sorry.
I get calls asking for manufacturer numbers. I mean, all the time.
Hmm.
But they know they can come to me and I'll help them get whatever information that they need. It's just it's all part of the job. It's not that I'm going to get a sale necessarily today from that, but it's all part of the relationship and building that trust.
Right. You know, I mean, Ken is arguably one of the only persons to ever text me a picture of my bald spot. But yeah, I mean, I'll get, and just, I mean, Christmas and New Year's, you know, I've got a dozen different customers that'll text and say, hey, Happy New Year. It's just, you know, you make friends. And I mean, we're just in an industry where we're, I guess, blessed enough that we get paid to go out and make friends. I mean, how cool is that?
But again, and I'll make the point they made earlier. It is not only the price.
Nope.
If you're looking for the cheapest anything, you're probably going to get the wrong thing in the end.
Well, you're going to get exactly what you asked for. But yeah, it's like I said, good, fast, cheap. I mean, you're looking at the long-term support. You're looking at cost of operation. You know, I mean, you can still find here and there a 20 kilowatt tube transmitter that will be a lot cheaper than a 20 kilowatt solid state till the power bill rolls in. You know, so it's going to vary, and it's situational. There's no question about it. You know, I've talked to guys and they've said, look, you've quoted us this much. Elenos, for example, has quoted us so much less. And I said, well, you know, based on your situation, the Elenos is probably not a bad deal for your particular situation right now, your circumstances. But you know, on the other hand, I've had folks go the other way. So yeah, it varies, and I try to avoid brand names, but you know, there are a lot of decent transmitters out there. It's just I think that ours may be a little bit better in some cases.
And it's true. There are a lot of people that swear by Nortel. There are some that swear at Nortel. And the
Hmm.
same thing applies for Gates Air or BE Elenos. There are people that have had excellent uh, purchases and time of use. And then there are some companies where when you get the product, it may not be complete or it may not be even on the right frequency.
Yeah.
And
Now the funny thing too is, and it's sort of a corollary. Typically, I've always said from a maintenance perspective, you know, cool, clean, well grounded. If you do those 3 things for any transmitter, it's going to live a lot longer, no matter whose name's on the front. The challenge is that the people that tend to be going for the exact cheapest they can find in a transmitter are tending to follow the same principles when it comes to site maintenance. so they don't get cool, clean, or well grounded. So it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in some cases.
Cool, clean, and grounded used to be what George Marty said every time.
Mm-hmm.
Long time ago, back when I was a lot younger.
But I always allowed that if you put George Marty, Leonard Cohen, and shoot, Bernie Wise in the same room, the air would be blue, but it would be a heck of a conversation.
Well, I think one of the things that you learn over the years is the attention that each manufacturer gives to these things. I remember somebody telling me that Wilkinson transmitters were built on the basis of how many parts they could take out, and whatever was left is what they delivered.
You just start removing parts till it stops working and put the last part back in.
Yeah. But I think we get back to this issue, Brian. Maybe you want to speak to it for just a moment. And I'm sure over your career you've used different makes of transmitters, as have I, as have most people here today. Uh, what makes you decide, or what made you decide which company to call?
Well, just like what makes people decide which vendor to call, to call me or to call Mary, it's relationship.
Yeah.
I will not lie. I have a very good, solid relationship with both Jeffs at Nautel, and I can count on them. And yes, sometimes they tell me that it's going to be 20 to 26 weeks to get a transmitter, but I just have to swallow it and put up with it. But it's who's going to tell you the truth. And I really, if you really want to lose my trust, sugarcoat the truth. And and I will move on, to be honest with you, because my customer is going to be really unhappy with me.
I have a good friend in Las Vegas who nearly lost his job because a company offered to sell him an antenna and says, "Oh yeah, we'll meet your delivery date," knowing when he took the order he couldn't meet the delivery date.
Yeah, that's just a huge mistake. And that's not really, in my opinion, unforgivable. If it's gonna take 20 weeks to deliver a transmitter, so be it. It's gonna take 20 weeks.
And where it becomes a challenge, and this is a challenge that we're continually dealing with, and Wilson will start nodding his head in a second.
No, he's just nodding off.
It comes back to our own production, because they'll give us an estimate. Like right now, a high-powered GV is they're telling us 11 weeks. So we fudge it a little and say 10 to 12. And that's all well and good, but when week 11 rolls around, if they come back and say it's going to be 4 weeks later, that puts us in a position. So yeah, definitely it's a two-way street all the way around.
Yeah.
But that's where relationships are key, because that happened to me in the last 2 years several times. A manufacturer would give me a date and it'd move out like 5 times, and as a salesperson, you never want to be put in that position. I know, Brian, you probably had the same situation happen, because you just don't want to be in that position. So that's why you have to build the relationships, because then you've got a customer that knows that you're not just sugarcoating it, or you didn't tell them something that wasn't reality. It's just, and then you have to explain things like, I've had customers tell me, "Oh, COVID's all over." Well, COVID is over, but the lingering effects of it in manufacturing is still there. Like,
I'll tell another little brief story, and that is some years ago. I was in the market for a 5 kilowatt transmitter. on AM, and I had a quote from 3 different companies. What happened eventually? I was in Dallas, and I stopped in at the Rockwell Collins factory at that time. And that's when I met Jack Selmeyer. And I can only tell you, I had not met him before. I had not spoken with him before. But sitting there with Jack on a stool in front of a power rock, it took me about 5 to 10 minutes. I knew that was the transmitter I was going to buy. And from that day on, of course, Jack and Ken Branton and Dave Chenoweth and all, they were right there. Not only were they there to not only explain the product in the front, but to support it in the long run. Now we're talking about transmitters in the main here, largely because Jeff's here. And we could talk about the same thing in terms of codecs, consoles, audio processors. And
Plus, Ken Branton knew some great jokes.
Yes.
Most of mine aren't fit for public consumption, so I tend to try to limit that.
yeah, Jack was a little sometimes coarse in his jokes. But if you got along with Jack, you got a lot done. You had to know that you did it Jack's way or just go elsewhere.
Well, and it's funny because Jack and I locked horns really early on because he was installing a station, and I questioned the way he had grounded it. And I was young, but I'd been trained by our folks, and he didn't take well to that. And it was probably 10 years before he'd speak to me after that. And that just happened to be I was doing a session on TAB on digital AM, and somebody had asked a question related to antenna systems. And Jack was in the back, and I pointed at him and I said, "Nuh-uh." I said, "When it comes to antennas, Jack knows way more about that stuff than I ever will." I said, "He'd be the guy to ask about directional bandwidth." And so they asked him about phase rotation, and he answered the question. Life was grand. And then I think he realized that it's not that I was necessarily knocking him down on that grounding thing. It was a subject that I knew a little bit more about at that time. And so I commented accordingly. And that was also maybe where I learned to be a little more tactful when I'm commenting on stuff.
Grounding at transmitter sites. That is more a religion than anything else, and we all have our beliefs. And I
By
left.
God, they will not be changed.
That's right. I was on another listserv several years ago, and I made the mistake of making a comment about the way I've built every one of my transmitter sites and how I've never had lightning failures at those transmitter sites because of the way I do things, in my opinion. And everybody started laughing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left that list, and I haven't been back.
And you said, if that ain't the truth, I hope lightning strikes me now.
See, I've never tempted lightning, but
But
yeah,
you will sell us a set of ferrites, though.
oh, absolutely. No, and I've said that over and over. I got the reputation for the ferrites, but the ferrites on their own don't do anything. If you don't have grounding and surge protection in place, then the ferrites are just going to explode when bad stuff happens, which is entertaining in its own light, but not necessarily a solution.
Yeah, it's not really to dump the ferrites name or product on your back alone, but you have been you've been out there in the public speaking at conventions and state and local meetings and here and pointing out that it is a complete system to
Yep.
do properly to make a grounded location.
Right. I mean, the best single point grounding in the world without surge protection isn't going to be complete in a high lightning area. Now, if you've got good surge protection and excellent grounding, you may not even need the ferrets. They may not make a lot of difference. But if you're still getting some residual failures, maybe they'll be that tipping point that just gets you over it.
I got an email today from Tom Labarge and Groundlings, and he has come on and discussed this with us several times. The grounding point or points, or how you ground, or how many ohms to ground can vary greatly, even when somebody put down putatively a copper rod. So, well, we've reached a point here where, Jeff, you're probably going to tell us that you're going to have to jump off and head out.
Yep, I'm half expecting a text from the real boss to tell me that her car that doesn't have any heat is not going to go pick the boy up from school, and I need to get in the truck. So we'll find out.
But as always, we're grateful that you stopped in and chatted with us today, and some very excellent suggestions. And I hope for those of you, there's some 60 folks that have been along with us today so far, and we'll put a video up. But there have been 60 plus. And I hope that some of you who have not spoken up or put something in the chat box, I hope you've learned something. I hope you have discovered a better way to contact and deal with the different reps, whether it be direct, as in the case of Jeff, or indirect through a rep who may have different products at hand. And as Mary said earlier, you may think you want something, but when you discuss the needs and the application, you may discover that something else will serve you better.
Yeah, and I mean, so your takeaways from today: change your batteries, call Mary if you need red shoes, and Brian can be cussed at late at night without fear of reprisal.
Man, we've learned something.
And
That's what we're here for.
And Jeff at Nautel.com is not a legitimate email address yet, but we're working on it.
Watch out, John Oliver might take it.
Well, the funny thing is, when we knew Ted was retiring, we had threatened to try to hire Jeff Williams away from Yellow Tech, and then it'd be Jeff Williams, Jeff Wilton, and Welton and Wilson covering the entire country, and then we would have had an argument for Jeff at Nautel.com.
Sounds like something from the old Bob Newhart. This is my brother Jeff and my other brother Jeff.
So the funny thing is, I have a foster brother, and his name is Jeff. So my sister Jennifer we'd go out to the bars when she was in college, and she'd go, "I'm Jennifer. This is my brother Jeff and my other brother Jeff." So didn't happen often, but it was always fun.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Jeff.
My pleasure. We'll see y'all later. Bye now.